The resource war, white gold, and the true stakes in Ukraine. The single most significant piece of intelligence in this brief is the Russian capture of the Shevchenko lithium mine. This event strips away the veneer of a purely ideological or territorial conflict and exposes the raw, materialistic, and geopolitical core of the war in Ukraine. 1.1. The seizure of Shevchenko, a strategic masterstroke. The plot: Russia's plot is to execute a strategy of strategic resource conquest. By systematically targeting and capturing Ukraine's most valuable mineral deposits, Moscow aims to achieve three simultaneous objectives: permanently cripple Ukraine, deny Kiev the potential to become Europe's leading lithium producer, thereby eliminating a future economic engine that could have funded its reconstruction and long-term independence. This ensures any remaining Ukrainian state is a weak, resource-poor, and dependent entity. Bolster Russia's own power. Absorb this white gold into the Russian Federation, solidifying its status as a resource superpower that controls not just legacy energy, oil and gas, but also the critical minerals of the future. Putin's suggestion of cooperation with foreign partners on these new assets is a clear signal to BRICS nations like China and India that Russia can be the gatekeeper to a non-Western critical mineral supply chain. Directly challenge U.S. interests. The plot is exquisitely timed to challenge the stated resource-first foreign policy of a potential Trump administration. It is a direct move on the geopolitical chessboard, taking a key asset that the U.S. coveted. The intention to make an unwinnable case for U.S. aid. Russia's intention is to make continued U.S. support for Ukraine a strategically illogical proposition from a transactional viewpoint. The Kremlin is effectively saying to Washington, the main prize you were playing for is now gone. Every dollar you spend now is throwing good money after bad. Your return on investment is negative. Why continue? This is a powerful argument designed to resonate with an America-first worldview. 1.2. The military underpinning, attrition, yields a prize. This strategic resource victory was only possible because of Russia's success in the grinding war of military attrition. The accelerating territorial gains in June are not just lines on a map. They are the physical process of acquiring these valuable lands. Russia's grinder doctrine is not just about killing soldiers. It is about consuming square kilometers of resource-rich territory. The military advance and the resource conquest are two sides of the same coin. Part 2. The war of economic and technological attrition. The concept of attrition extends far beyond the battlefield. The intelligence highlights two critical fronts where this war of endurance is being waged: the technological front in the Middle East and the financial front against the global economic system. 2.1. The THAAD dilemma, the unsustainability of high-tech defense. The data on the THAAD missile expenditure in the Middle East is a strategic bombshell with global implications. The plot of Iran and its proxies to wage cost imposition warfare. The plot is to exploit the massive cost disparity between their own low-cost offensive missiles, drones, and the West's exorbitantly expensive defensive interceptors. The math of defeat, cost asymmetry, a $15 million THAAD interceptor used against a missile that may cost less than $1 million, or a drone that costs a few thousand, is an economically catastrophic exchange ratio for the defender. Production asymmetry. The fact that the US can only produce a handful of these interceptors per year, 12 in FY 2025, while adversaries can mass-produce their offensive weapons, means that the defender's arsenal can be depleted in a matter of weeks, while replenishment takes years. The intention and implication. This is not just a tactical problem. It is a fundamental crisis for Western military doctrine, the intention of adversaries. To make the cost of protecting U.S. allies prohibitively high, thereby attriting America's will to maintain its global security commitments. The global implication. Every potential U.S. adversary, especially China in a Taiwan scenario, is studying this with intense interest. It demonstrates that a large-scale saturating attack with low-cost missiles and drones can overwhelm and bankrupt even the most technologically advanced defense systems. This vulnerability will force a radical rethinking of Western military procurement. pushing it towards directed energy weapons, lasers, and other low-cost per-shot solutions. 2.2. Russia's war on the dollar, the frozen assets gambit. President Putin's threat to abandon the Western financial system if Russia's frozen assets are confiscated is a major move in the global war of economic attrition. The plot: to preemptively counter the West's use of the financial system as a weapon by threatening to break that system entirely. The intention? To deter confiscation. The primary intention is to deter the EU and US from taking the final step of seizing the $300 billion in assets. The threat is to make the consequences of this act so damaging to the West itself that they will not dare to do it. To accelerate de-dollarization, Russia is using this crisis to accelerate a long-term strategic goal: the creation of a parallel, non-Western financial system based on regional payment systems and currencies other than the US dollar. The threat of an irreversible shift is a rallying cry to other nations like China, Iran, and others in the global South who are wary of US financial dominance and secondary sanctions. To exploit Western divisions, Russia knows there are deep divisions on this issue. The IMF's caution about damaging global trust reflects the fears of many institutionalists. By making this threat, Putin gives ammunition to those in the West who are arguing against confiscation, thereby driving a wedge between the hawks and the doves. This is a high-stakes game of financial chicken. Russia is betting that the West values the stability of the global financial system, from which it benefits enormously, more than it desires to seize the $300 billion for Ukraine. Part 3. The War of Political Attrition and Psychological Posturing. The attritional logic is also playing out in the diplomatic and political arenas through a series of standoffs, probes, and psychological operations designed to test resolve and create pressure. 3.1. The NATO-Russia new normal statute. Perpetual probing, the constant interceptions over the Baltic and the tensions over F-35s in Estonia are part of a long-term war of political and military attrition. The plot: to maintain a state of constant, low-grade pressure to test defenses, gather intelligence, and psychologically wear down the adversary. Russia's intention: to demonstrate that it will not be intimidated by NATO expansion and to constantly remind the Baltic states of their vulnerability. NATO's intention: to demonstrate resolve and the credibility of its collective defense commitment. This is the new normal in Europe, a tense standoff where both sides are perpetually probing for weakness, a state of sustained political attrition that consumes resources and frays nerves. Putin's contradictory statements about reducing military spending while presiding over the highest budget since the Cold War are part of this psychological game, designed to confuse and disarm. 3.2. The Korean Peninsula, a cycle of gesture and recalcitrance. The situation in Korea is another attritional standoff, characterized by cycles of conciliatory gestures and hardline responses. South Korea's plot: President Yoon's suspension of anti-North broadcasts is a goodwill gesture, an attempt to break the cycle of escalation and create an opening for dialogue. The intention: to de-escalate tensions and demonstrate a new, more pragmatic approach. The reality: this is immediately undermined by other factors such as the arrest of US citizens trying to send aid, a hardline enforcement of domestic law, and the restoration of DMZ guard posts, a tit-for-tat military response to North Korean actions. This shows the difficulty of breaking the deeply entrenched logic of confrontation on the peninsula. 3.3. The Hun Sen method: attrition of a leader's legitimacy. As we've analyzed before, Hun Sen's campaign against the Thai government is a masterful form of political attrition. His dismissal of his own missiles to Bangkok claim as mere political posturing after it has already served its purpose of creating a crisis is a sign of a political operator who is several moves ahead. He creates a crisis, forces his opponent to react, and then dismisses the crisis, leaving his opponent looking over-militarized and foolish. The goal is to slowly erode the Thai PM's credibility until her position becomes untenable. Part 4. The Eurasian Great Game: The attrition of stability. The analysis of the Central Asian situation reveals a deep-seated Russian fear of an attrition of its strategic stability. The plot. Russia's plot is to prevent the West from opening a second front of instability on its southern flank. The fear, destabilization by proxy. The fear is that a chaotic Iran would become a launchpad for extremist groups that could then wage a long, grinding war of attrition against the stability of Central Asian states and, by extension, Russia itself. This is the Great Game reborn, where a regional conflict in the Middle East is seen as a potential tool to weaken and distract Russia. The responsible neighbor doctrine. Russia's response is a sophisticated attempt to build a self-reliant security bloc. By stating it cannot bear the sole responsibility, Russia is forcing the Central Asian states to invest in their own stability, making the entire region more resilient to external interference. This is a long-term strategy to counter a potential long-term war of attrition waged by Western-backed proxies. Grand synthesis. A world in a state of protracted multi-domain conflict. The intelligence, when viewed holistically, reveals a world where the defining characteristic of international relations is a multi-domain war of attrition. Resource attrition is paramount. The battle for strategic resources like lithium is now a central driver of military conflict. The power to control these resources is the power to control the future economy. Economic attrition is a primary weapon. The war is being fought with interest rates, sanctions, and control over payment systems as much as it is with tanks and missiles. The standoff over Russia's frozen assets is a battle for the future of the global financial order. Technological attrition reveals systemic vulnerabilities. The cost imbalance of high-tech defensive systems versus low-cost offensive ones is a fundamental vulnerability for the West. The side that can best manage this economic and production asymmetry will have a decisive advantage. Political attrition erodes will and alliances. The endless cycle of probing, posturing, and psychological operations is designed to wear down the political will of adversaries and create fractures within alliances. This is a long, slow, and often invisible battle, but it is just as critical as any on the ground. We are living in an age of strategic exhaustion. The conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and the tensions in Asia are not short, sharp crises that will be resolved quickly. They are the opening phases of a long-term grinding competition for resources, influence, and endurance. The nations and alliances that have the economic resilience, the industrial capacity, the political will, and the strategic patience to withstand this global war of attrition will be the ones to shape the 21st century.